Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating new contribution by Willem Scheepers, which was recently published over on the Management Pro blog. We're going to dive right into the true cost of frictionless AI. We hear all the time about how artificial intelligence saves us time and effort, but Scheepers asks us to look a little closer at what it might be quietly taking away from our professional lives.
Who still thinks when AI gives the answer? It's the ultimate paradox of our daily AI usage, isn't it? AI makes our work so much faster, simpler, and way more comfortable. But what happens when the technology removes not just the heavy administrative burden, but also our fundamental need to doubt, to experiment, to interpret, and to actually judge things for ourselves?
Picture standing in front of two totally different paths. On one side, you've got this smooth, glowing, completely frictionless road. That's AI. It's incredibly seductive because it's so fast and easy. But look over at the other option. Heavy, disconnected, physical stone steps. Making your way across those takes serious time and effort. But here's the kicker. The effort required to navigate those difficult steps is exactly what builds our professional muscle and expertise.
So let's get into Section 1, the price of frictionless AI.
The trade-off we're making here is wild. Obviously, the promise of AI is super appealing. We don't have to search as much, we write faster, we barely wait for anything. We gain massive short-term productivity. But Scheepers points out the hidden price we're paying. When AI systematically removes our mental resistance, sure, an organization might win on speed, but they invisibly lose something huge. They lose the human ability to think independently when the stakes are high. Slowly but surely, the technology just starts taking over the actual judgment calls.
Which brings us to a really vital distinction in Section 2. Process friction versus cognitive friction. Because honestly, not all friction is bad.
Process friction is basically that busy work we all absolutely despise. Retyping data, hunting down standard files, duplicating reports. It just slows you down without adding a single drop of value. AI is phenomenal at wiping this out, and it absolutely should. Nobody becomes a better professional by doing manual data entry. But cognitive friction? That is a totally different ballgame. That's the necessary slowdown you need to deeply understand a complex problem, to weigh alternatives, to feel a little bit of doubt, and to ultimately make a really tough decision.
I absolutely love this concept. Sometimes the delay is not a defect in the process. Sometimes it is the work. Just think about a lawyer piecing together a complex counterargument, or a doctor trying to read confusing medical signals, or even a manager prepping for a highly uncomfortable conversation. That heavy mental lifting they put in doesn't just produce an outcome on paper. That effort is exactly how their professional judgment and expertise are forged over time.
And this sets up a fascinating learning paradox. When we produce the work ourselves, when we do that messy initial analysis and fix our own mistakes, we learn to spot the underlying patterns. But AI instantly turns us from producers into reviewers. It feels like a total upgrade, right? But here is the catch. To properly review an AI's highly plausible-sounding answer, you need deep domain knowledge. And how do you get that knowledge? By producing the work yourself. If you haven't built that foundation, you are completely unequipped to actually judge if the AI's output is any good.
So what happens to a business that just ignores this learning paradox? That brings us to Section 3, the risk of human hollowing.
Scheepers coined this term, and it was going to stick with you, human hollowing. It basically means that formally the human is still in the process. Your name is on the final document, your title is still right there on the org chart, but your brain, it's basically checked out. The actual cognitive role, the deep, rigorous thinking, has quietly been handed over to the machine.
Let's look at some real-world symptoms so you can spot this happening in the wild. Technically, the employee writes the report, but the AI actually came up with the entire core argument. Or a professional formally signs off on a decision, but the AI system was the one that selected which information was even relevant to look at in the first place. And here's one that should give you some real anxiety. A manager is held responsible for an action plan generated by an AI model, but they never even investigated the model's underlying assumptions. If things go south, who is actually in charge here?
For the business leaders watching this explainer, we really need to reframe this problem. Human hollowing is not just some soft HR issue or a minor gap in your training program. This is a massive risk to the governance and continuity of your entire organization. If a system crashes or an exceptional situation pops up where a decision has to be defended publicly, it's suddenly going to become very obvious that the person formerly in charge doesn't actually master the content anymore.
Luckily, Scheepers doesn't just leave us with impending doom. He offers a strategic framework to actually fix this. Let's head to Section 4, the cognitive allocation principle. The true value of AI isn't about how much total work it can crank out. It's about which cognitive activities the human is forced to keep doing. Treat these questions like your new organizational checklist. When you implement AI, you have to ask, who is defining the problem? Who is formulating the alternatives? Who is critically checking the work? Who actually learns from the mistakes? And who bears demonstrable responsibility? If the answer to all of those is the AI, then the human is literally just clicking agree. And let's be real, a human whose only job is clicking agree does not provide meaningful oversight.
Which sets us up perfectly for the final paradigm shift in Section 5, moving toward the right to friction.
We are constantly hearing about the right to use AI, right? Well, Scheepers argues that we need to fiercely protect the right to cognitive friction. So how do organizations practically pull that off? First, make your starters do their own rigorous analysis before they're ever allowed to consult the AI. Second, demand independent, documented human judgment for any big decisions. Third, make sure your teams periodically practice doing things completely without AI, just to keep those critical survival skills sharp. And finally, rethink how you measure productivity so that you're actually rewarding learning and craftsmanship, not just raw output speed.
Because look, friction isn't a one-size-fits-all rule. A seasoned expert has the deep, underlying knowledge required to safely automate routine tasks without losing their edge. But a starter, if they automate those exact same tasks, they literally skip the very experiences they need to ever become an expert in the first place. Cognitive allocation has to be super strategic and tied directly to where someone is in their career phase.
Which means the boardroom is going to need an entirely new set of KPIs. You have to ask yourselves, can our employees still reach an independent judgment? How often do our people actually push back and contradicts the AI with solid, motivated reasoning? And how long could our critical business processes responsibly keep running if the AI just went offline tomorrow? These are not feel-good metrics. They are vital early warning signals of human capital debt and organizational vulnerability that executives absolutely must start monitoring. I think this whole concept is captured perfectly in this powerful quote: not the human in the loop, but the human in development. Human in the loop sounds incredibly comforting, doesn't it? But it is totally insufficient if that human is just a passive button pusher. AI is a phenomenal tool. It absolutely should free us from soul-crushing busy work. But we cannot let it invisibly rob us of the hard experiences that actually build our expertise, our autonomy, and our professional character. I want to leave you with Willem Scheepers' ultimate question. The defining question of this AI era is not, how do we make work entirely frictionless? The real question is, which cognitive friction must we consciously preserve to ensure we can still think, judge, and act without a machine? Take a second today to look at your own daily workflow. What difficult effort are you trying to automate away right now that might actually be the exact thing keeping you competent? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep pushing yourselves, and seriously, don't be afraid to embrace the friction.